as we have been observing and following the pages of Global Hub Shapers Kohima, we have very dynamic speakers with us today. So as the moderator and also as a participant, I'm very excited and looking forward to hear the thoughts of the speakers. So without further ado, because we are running short of time, I think we have started 15 minutes late. I'll take the time to officially welcome again everyone to the session. So we are at the first dialogue session, volume 1, The Future is Now. The theme under the theme Sustainable Strategies for Lasting Impact, and today the focus is going to be, we'll be hearing the voices from the field on building environmental resilience in Nagaland. So to start with, I would like to invite Kivisato Sanna. He is born in Nagaland and raised in Australia. So he has done his education at RMIT University Australia in Advanced Diploma of Business and Marketing, and he has done another education course in Swinburne University of Technology with the Masters of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. So he has a very long list of work experience, more than a decade of work experience. So currently he's the founder of Nagaed, which is one of the best startups in the entire Northeast, in fact even in India. And he's a part of the Confederation of Indian Industry, CII. He's a member of the Task Force on Policy Advocacy, member National Committee on Skill Development and Livelihood. He's also under the advisory board member, UPSOL. He has worked at RMIT University Australia as an evaluation specialist, product advisor, and senior analyst. A while back in Nagaland, he has also worked with the Entrepreneurs Associate and groups of social ventures as the strategy advisor. Not only Nagaed, he is also the founder of Wonder Nagaland when he was still based in Australia. And he's also the advisory board member for Launchpad Network based out of Australia. And again, while back in Australia, he has worked with the Wilderness Society Australia as an organizer, as in the capacity of a community campaigner and the regional fundraising coordinator. And apart from this, he has also volunteered with several agencies during his work experiences. So I think if you have read about dad's book, I think one of the most interesting insights which I got was the initiatives of change. So he has also extensively worked with the agency as a mentor, sustainable impact monitoring, and also as the coordinator for Asia Pacific Youth Conference, and also as the program coordinator. So yeah, that is for Kevi. I invite you to the stage. So let's all give a big round of applause for Kevi. Secondly, we have a very young, dynamic individual among us today. He is none other than Boka Rochil, if that is how it's pronounced, sorry. So he has had his education at JNTUH, College of Engineering, Hyderabad, and he has done his Bachelor of Technology. He has done his Bachelor of Technology over there. And moving on, he has done his Masters of Science in Urban Policy and Governance at Tata Institute of Social Science in Mumbai. So coming to his experiences, he has done several internships. And why I want to take this time to also stress on the importance of internships is, when I was still studying in St. Joseph, the concept of internship was not even there for me. So at least for me, when I did my master's in Tamil Nadu, the importance, the relevance, the need for the internship actually came up. So for all the semesters, we kept having internships for all the semesters, which is very crucial to build your skills, to gain knowledge from different organizations, and also to get to know how the real organization works in the actual world. So Nagaland, in that aspect, I also wanted to share about his internship experiences. So he has interned at Kohima Smart City Development Limited. He has also worked as a policy intern in Dimapur Municipal Council, and he was the alumni outreach representative for TIS Mumbai. And coming back to his professional experience, he has worked as the urban infrastructure analyst at IP Global Limited, New Delhi. And currently, He is working as a young professional at Asian Development Bank, National Institute of Urban Affairs. So that is in short is ADB NIUA. So again, the fellowship, the program which he is currently working under, very competitive. It's the first cohort out of like 800 plus candidates. He was selected among the 10 selected candidates. So let's all give him a big round of applause and invite him to the stage. And moving on to the third speaker, we have our very own local Global Shapers member. He is Teja Tsukru. So just for your information, he was the previous curator of Global Hub Shapers for the year 23 to 24. So under his curatorship, under his leadership, the team has also been able to undertake the activities like which you have just seen, the outdoor library, and also initiate a few conversations, a few sessions on gear conversations. So architect by profession, he has done his education at JNU Architecture Department, Hyderabad. And coming to his experience, he is currently working as the senior architect under the Smart City Mission, which falls under Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So initially he started his professional work experience in Tech Mahindra based out of Hyderabad. And not only that, he also heads the Tsukru Group and Northeast Infrastructure Solutions. And he's also leading 2 Nagaland-based AEC firms, which is actually driving infrastructure innovation in the region. And the latest thing which is trending in town is that he's the proprietor of the Mirage. So let's all welcome him to the stage.
Kind and warm welcome and introduction. I think we went through my own LinkedIn. With that one, nothing left unturned. It's so nice to be here, and it's so nice to see young people in the crowd. I think young people is where we get our energy from. It's where we see hope. So that it's really, really exciting for me to be here and to see people involved in creating change and shaping the world as you are global shapers, but also shaping our backyard as well. So very excited to be here, and thank you so much for Global Shapers for the kind invitation. This, of course, we're talking about sustainability, and I think the first thought that comes to me is that nature provides outstanding opportunities for contemplation, reflection, and renewal of the human spirit. So I believe this to be true. Right? In fact, just yesterday I was in my village. We went to Konama, we went to Dileke to spend some time with nature in the forest. When I was young, my father used to tell me stories about when he was young. So when somebody was sick, when somebody was unwell, whether physically or otherwise, they would take a chicken and they'd go into the forest. Our closest forests are near Zillik area. I'm sure a lot of you have been doing picnics in that area. And they would sacrifice the chicken or a pheasant to Chikeo, the god of the forest. And the forest there is meant to heal. In addition, there's also a stream. It's an underground stream that brings up water that, again, if somebody's sick, it heals you. So nature has this unbelievable power for contemplation, reflection, and also renewal and healing. Right? And you'll also find this when you go into the forest. So the air quality in the forest is different. Right? So when it enters your lungs, right, you have more oxygen and more minerals going through. If you're drinking water from a fresh spring, you have more minerals going through. And so it does provide a lot of these things that heal us. So the reason I say this is, even when I was young, we grew up in high school, so we used to go playing down in the Sanyo River, which probably now does not look the same that it used to. But we used to catch frogs, snails, we used to go beans, we used to go swimming. And I have a lot of these memories from when I was young. And the reason that I say that, because as a person is growing up, as a young person is growing up, they need to have an experience of nature to understand its intrinsic value. So if you just grow up in a city, like Delhi, maybe many of you have been to Delhi or Bangalore. If you just grow up in a city area in a concrete jungle, so to speak, and you don't have that experience of nature, it's near impossible for you to understand the value of nature rather than, say, resource extraction. Right? So I was with some friends from Parks Canada, and they had done extensive research on this. Right? And when you give children an experience of nature before the age of 8 years old, right, whether it's in the park, whether it's in the forest, whether it's by a stream, later on in life, when you explain the concept of sustainability and explain the concept of nature, they get it. When somebody doesn't have that experience, they don't get it. And for us, a lot of our policymakers, right, are coming from the cities. And so these aspects of childhood experiences, of the way that our forefathers used to live, is very foreign to them. And so Northeast as a whole is really seen as a buffer state, right? Or as a place for natural resource extraction, right? And this is the value. So we have to explain to our policymakers who have not had that, may not have had those experiences, that nature is important, and how does that play out into policy? So when I was with Parks Canada, they had a program called Youth Ambassadors. So Youth Ambassadors used to travel. I met an influencer. He used to travel across all the parks, the national parks across Canada, and promote youth going into parks and children having the experiences. Nowadays, they even have, I looked it up recently, they have Explore, Parks Canada Explore with an X, where they encourage children to go. And the reason they did this was specifically for conservation. Right? So they need their youth to go into their national parks so that when they're proposing conservation policy, the youth who can later vote understand why this policy is needed, because they have a personal experience of it. I think one of the challenges we're having, and I'm not into depth on this, but I've had a couple of conversations about the Forest Amendment Act 2013, I think the 100-kilometer border. So these things do play out in real life. So your connection to nature, your experience to nature, right, affects your worldview and how you perceive these policies and what the value of these policies are. So it's so important. This some other examples that I really wanted to share. So when I was in Teleke yesterday, I was taking some friends from Delhi, and as we were going through the forest, the example that I showed him was like, look at this forest, right? To our villagers, this is a logged forest. So when I speak to my cousin, who's a carpenter, he says, this forest has been logged. As in, there's a process called selective logging. As in, they've gone into the forest, hand-selected the good pieces of wood, taken it out, turned it into furniture and whatever they need, and the rest of the forest they've left intact. Whereas if you take the same forest to a foreign eye, and it's a very richly biodiverse forest. They're doing some tracking at the moment of wildcats, leopards up in Karnataka at the moment. So it's a very biodiverse forest. But for the village people, it's a logged forest, as in we cannot extract any more resources out of it. The rest of the resources in the forest are for the forest, right? And the resource for the human beings, for our villagers, is done. If you show the same forest to somebody from Delhi, from Bangalore, from Pune, wherever, or even international, they'll say this forest is not logged, and we can log it much more to extract more resources. Right? So these experiences change the way you view the actual forest itself. So even from our village, these are things and these are practices, these are worldviews that we need to articulate to a wider world about how we derive value. And I just wanted to share some examples that have been done other places around the world. So I grew up in Australia, and right next to Australia we have New Zealand. Many people get confused. Originally I thought New Zealand used to be an island of Australia. It's a separate country when I was young, when we first went there. But one of the real great examples that they had there was in the year, where are we? In the year 2017, they gave a river legal personhood. Right? So the river is called Wangani River, right? And under legislation, it's protected as a person and it has the rights of a person. This was done largely through the advocacy of the Maori tribe, which are the indigenous population there, and they've been advocated for about 140 years because it's a very important river for them. It gives life, right? And it's their spiritual ancestor. So they've been advocated for a long time. And 2017 it got passed through. And the way that it works is that it's a living river, it's a person, it provides and sustains them, and it's their ancestor. And so you have one representative from government and one representative from their tribe who is the legal guardian of that river and looks out for the interests of that river. Other works are like this in the Amazon. So the Amazon tribes are also looking to work the Amazon forest and the Amazon river and give that the status of legal personhood. So the Amazon is the largest living organism on the planet, the mycelium network of the forest, the largest living organism in the planet, so they're trying to do that. Another great example is in Bolivia. They've got the law of Mother Earth that was passed in 2010. So they have a concept called Pachamama, which is they have nature worship, and their mother goddess, the earth is their mother goddess. And so they also have the law of Mother Earth, and Mother Earth has the right to survive. So as tribal and indigenous peoples, we have value to add to shape policies that reflect our worldviews. And to find that intrinsic value of nature, because for most of us, even if we say we grew up in a town, you can just look above us and we've got forests. So these are some of the great things that we have that maybe people who grew up in cities don't have. One final example is I worked on a campaign called the Kimberley Campaign. It's in Western Australia. And it's a beautiful region. It's the second largest coastline in the world that's untouched, second to Antarctica. It's a humpback whale nursery. It's the world's largest humpback whale nursery. And it's got dinosaur fossil. It's a large dinosaur fossil area. It's also land to the indigenous tribes and population in Australia called the Aborigines. So one day, in a road called Manari Road, it's a very big road in the middle of nowhere. This is about 200-300 kilometers from the closest town. It's in the desert, it's in the middle of nowhere. Law Boss is what they call their chief. Phil was walking down Manari Road and he saw some workers doing some work. So he said, "Who did you ask permission to do this work?" And the workers said, "We asked the government, the state government." And he said, "It doesn't matter if you ask the state government. I am the law boss here. I am the chief. So you have to ask my permission." So he gathered all his tribes people and they stopped the work. The government said, "We need to get this done because we're going to build the largest gas refinery in the southern hemisphere." Right? If you imagine the distance from Kohima to Dimapur, it's going to be 10 times that size as one factory to extract natural gas, and it's going to disrupt that whole area. Of course, it was one of the largest funded projects in the southern hemisphere, and one of the funding bodies was an Indian oil and gas company as well, including Shell, Mobil, and all these large companies. So what they did was they said to these Aboriginal people, the tribal and the law boss, and they went to them and said, "We're going to do a lot of natural gas refining. It's going to give us billions of dollars." Right? So for your family, which is about 130 people, we will give you a package of $1.3 billion. I have no idea how many crores that is. But this is, we're talking dollars. So how many crores in rupees, you guys can calculate, I have no idea. His response to that was, "No, thank you. We are connected to this land, we are of this land, And we want this land for our many generations to come. Right? And I was so inspired, I went there, I got on a plane, I flew there, I spoke to him. He was a very simple guy. He was like, he reminded me of my Uncle Kaka and Kaka. And I spoke to him, and I spoke to his nephew as well. And I said, $1.3 billion is a lot of money. You and your family, for the next 100 generations will be okay, next 1,000 generations will be okay. And he said, what's the point of having a flash yacht if I can't go in my own ocean? What's the point of having a flash car if I can't drive in my own land? And what's the point of having a mansion if I can't live in my own land? And my children will never be able to touch this again. So we were so inspired by this. I went back to Melbourne. We rallied, because we lived in the cities, so the voting population is in the cities. The tribal people live in the desert, very small population. So we amped up a campaign. We put pressure on the government. It took about 4 or 5 years, right? And that area was then protected. But what it took, right, was the voice of the tribal indigenous population in that region to say that nature is important, conservation is important, sustainability is important, to inspire the rest of the country, to inspire so much that the Prime Minister puts that into protection. So I think there's a lot of value that we can add as tribal indigenous peoples into the way that we view the world, not just for our own backyard, but for the nation at large, and be a gift to the wider global community. And these are some examples that other tribal people have done around the world. So thank you so much for the time. I'm sure we'll go into questions, but I just wanted to share some of those experiences.
When we are all discussing things around sustainability, I think sustainability in itself as indigenous communities ourselves, I believe that sustainability is not something alien that our forefathers, we have been so used to and intimate to. It's just that now with urbanization, with development, we are at the crossroads. How do we ensure that development is also contingent with we call it linear. Do we go for a linear development, or do we go for a circular way of doing things? I would just like to touch on a couple of 3 or 4 points from my experiences working very closely across the government sector with senior leadership, and also with a couple of CSOs here in Nagaland itself. I would like to touch on, as an urbanist, as an urban practitioner myself, I would really like to touch a little bit on the cities. Firstly, how urbanization is emerging in Nagaland, and how we view sustainability in that context also. Secondly, I would like to touch a little bit on the waste management, and it's everywhere, right? We are all seeing that from our cities to our valley in Zutu. I would like to touch a little bit on that. And thirdly, I would like to touch on the human development, human capital aspect of as particularly youth, young human capital. So firstly, I'm a very passionate public transport advocate. You would see me taking the bus, you would see me taking the scooty around here also, and I think I just came taking a scooty. Let's contextualize ourselves here in Kohima. Nagaland has the highest private car ownership per household, in the Northeast, and we are the top 5 or 6 car ownership per household in India. I mean, can you just imagine what that pertains to, right? I mean, it has a lot of factors that we can read on to that, but so traffic now is becoming a very, very, very big issue. So it's not just about, say, when we imagine sustainability, how do we imagine also sustainable cities? What kind of topography we are in, right? It's hilly, our right of way is very small, it's quite narrow, and typically in bigger cities what we see is that you create more parking, right? But I mean, many studies and many case studies have also shown that you create more parking spaces, you have more cars on the road, which in urban transport what we call induced traffic, right? So in many cases, places like Kohima is shown, can we really imagine public transport, prioritizing more public transport? That also pertains to lower carbon emissions. Vehicular emissions contribute more than 30% of GHGs and all kinds of pollutants. So, I mean, when people say, oh, but we cannot do away with our private cars, how can we move around? And we cannot, this question, but I would like to take us all back to the Hornbill Festival, right? Was it not an efficient way of imagining how we move a lot of people from, they had certain very strategic points and the carrying capacity, how much a vehicle can carry a person also, that also in terms of not just moving people but also less vehicular emission, then we have lesser congestion and a lot of things around that. So when we imagine sustainability, I just wanted to really touch on the public transport aspect of it and how that pertains to more lesser emissions, more mobility, and just all kind of multiplier effects on that. So that's one thing that we particularly want to discuss with the broader audience here. Second, I would like to touch on my work very closely with the government of Nagaland in thinking about waste management across our cities here in Nagaland. For us, one of the key challenges that in waste management that as an urban service, one we noticed was particularly in hill states, right? Our challenges are quite different, just in terms of just imagine collection. Now I'll bring back the transport thing also. We have so many cars parked on the road that even for the waste trucks to pick up the trash, that's also a big challenge because early in the morning all the cars are parked on the road. I mean, Kohima, just imagine we just have a small narrow passage right of way. Now, these all issues are very interconnected. So when we think about policy interventions and when we think about policy, we like to take what we call a whole of systems approach, how each thing is interconnected and how do we imagine ground evidence-led holistic approach of seeing when we tackle our issues and when we propose policy recommendations. So in Westing, everyone sees it, everyone knows it, we're just not able to do something about it, right? So especially working with the government, one thing is that you need the right intent, you need the right kind of push, not just within the government, but folks outside the government to actually, because sometimes, I understand that we're all operating in a system where sometimes in government things are usually very slow. But how do we also, at least as a practitioner myself, what I work on was how do we identify mission-driven bureaucrats? There are certain mission-driven bureaucrats, we call them. So how do you try to build coalitions with them and bring in that these recommendations or solutions that we propose are not rocket science per se. It's just something which we break it down. So one of the things I initiated using the Hornbill Festival as a backdrop was in terms of waste management, just the collection and the transport itself in hill cities, they cost more than 50% of ULB's budget. So Green SAS team, which I proposed in collaboration with Center for Science and Environment, was that, and I'm very happy to share that the government of Nagaland has taken it up as an official policy recommendation, which is up for deliberation with the Urban Department and the Municipal Affairs. So it was not just about revenue generation. So that the whole point was that we generate revenue from tourists coming from outside. That that also it's also a policy endorsement recommendation by NITI Aayog, particularly for Indian Himalayan states, where waste management as a service, municipal service itself, is quite challenging. So when you have most of your revenue spending on waste management itself, then you have so many less things for processing waste and all this kind of capital. So more than just, besides the revenue augmentation aspect of it, it was also about how do we nudge people to be more conscious about, especially tourists coming, especially in festivals like Hornbill when we have high tourist footfall. So that was one of the things that we proposed, and that is up for further deliberation. Taking a chat from there, this January, after such a long time and planning, I was able to go finally to the Zuku Valley. It's like since I was young and since high school days, we always plan, and then it always not work out. But as a person working in space myself, everyone knows what's the situation in Zuku now, right? When you imagine Zuku, when you imagine valleys, last thing you want to see is trash. The last thing you imagine is plastic waste littered all over across the trail. it was very hard. It was very disturbing to see West deep inside the valley, in the rivers, in the base game itself. And it's not like the Southern Angami, the Sayo is not doing anything about it. Like my guide was a person from Sayo, and like we what we call development and what we call when one imagines Nagaland, one of the first top three things that comes to our mind is Zuku, right? But if we cannot also just if we cannot protect our own and cherish our own our natural valleys, our rivers, I mean, as indigenous communities ourselves, and I think I'd just like to touch a little bit on the whole concept of feast of merit, right? I mean, it all talks about as Nagas, most of our communities we practice the feast of merit, which really centers not individual advancement, but also really thinking about honoring and celebrating community, giving back, and just the whole environmental stewardship. Also, these are all very not alien to us. It's just that it's literally within us as Nagas that we practice. But also, I think as Nagas and young people, we're also at a time of like a certain we're in a kind of a position in the flux where how do we navigate through all these changes that's happening around us, but also ensure that we are really protecting our environment, thinking through all these things. So going back to the Zuku team, so after that, so everyone who has gone to Zuku understands what's happening in Zuku right now. We have more tourist footfall over the years. Sayo is themselves trying to do cleanups, but we have just started with the Department of Forest. Then I came back, I connected with this person, Clemile from Green Guard. Some of you might know him. We thought Green Guard would be the capacity building partner. The Department of Forests, Sir Supong, they invited Sayo. Just last 2 weeks back, we had our first preliminary meeting. How do we imagine a holistic strategy for the Zuku Valley? That's not just about a couple of cleanups a year, but really think about a more whole of systems approach, like the Department of Tourism, the Department of Forests, Sayo, leading at the ground, then Green Guard will give the hand-holding thing, and imagine West management at least thinking about 80% or 90% reduction in the West and management, as well as most of these polluting things that we see. I'll just go a little bit on the policy aspect also. So in Indian policy framework, when we think about plastic waste management, there's this whole thing called extended producer responsibility. So that says that the onus of management of waste should not just be the end users, which is all of us here, but also the producers themselves, the producer responsibility organizations, which are all these big corporations, which are all these, Chaudhary groups, for example, your YY, your PepsiCo, Lay's, all those kind of things. So the Indian Himalayan, there's this Indian Himalayan, they have done extensive study of 5 years, and they've shown that these are these big culprits that are polluting mostly across the Indian Himalayan mountain states. And we were thinking that Sayo, and we had this consultation, they were saying, yes, we really want to do something about it, but how can we start? Where do we start? And just very happy to share that, these things are all not rocket science. And something as a person working in policy, one of the key challenges that I noticed in my work also is that one would have, very good practices, best practices done, and very at the get-go, but how do you ensure that these things are enduring, right? How do you ensure that these things are lasting and not just like a couple of months or a couple of years? For all these things to happen, we need strong systems in place, and that's one thing we are trying to do with the Zuku team, also to establish a strong system that, say, example, if tomorrow Sayo leadership changes, still those kind of management could be done. So that is the second thing. And third thing, last I just want to touch on is I really believe Global Shapers Hub like this it's a fantastic opportunity for really bringing young youth voices, and just imagining Nagaland, Naga youth, our as per so many statistics, we show that Nagaland is still a very young population, and most of our demography is mostly young. But I won't go into the much broader aspects of the social, the education parameter. That's another whole thing altogether. But I believe Naga youths we are so naturally gifted. Generally, we are just very naturally gifted. We have such amazing things which people train in things, like soft skills, and we are very, very easy to pick things up. Just in terms of human capital development also, when we think about sustainability, I'm extending a little bit out of the whole thing, but then how can we ensure that our Naga youths in this transition stage that we are living in be equipped, be ready for all these kind of changes that we are all going through, and that when all these things, all these developments, processes come, and we ensure that our Naga youths are ready for that in terms of skill, in terms of readiness, in terms of also the know-how, right? So these are just some of the couple of points, and I would love to discuss further, particularly from women in the audience, because I'm aware that it's just a male panel here, so I would love to take questions from the audience as we move on. Yeah.
I think we have a very diverse panel. So like KV speaks on like the user experience, and Boka speaks on policy aspects, and for me, I think I'll also be touching a little bit on policies and like what we, it's more to do with user experience as well, but which is directly affecting us. So going back, when I was working with Tech Mahindra as a project management consultant, so for other cities, for them it's very important that like when you construct a building, they have certain bylaws that you need to follow, right? Out here we don't normally do that, but and there is one more point which for your buildings to get approved with the municipal, so it's called IGBC. So it's Indian Green Building Certification, which is very important. So I was working with the team in Hyderabad, and like they were really focusing on IGBC certifications. And now after that, I always thought why don't we do something like that back home, right? And in line with the sustainable goals as well. So coming back to Kohima, I started working with Kohima Smart City, and so I wanted to highlight this. Like I got the theme for today's dialogue, and I was really excited. So not many people know this story, so I'll just get into it. And so initially, the project cost for Kohima Smart City mission was 1,000 CR, right? And it was on a 50-50 pattern. So 500 CR from the ministry, that is Delhi, in a layman's term, and 500 from the state government, right? And we all know like the state of our government. So we were unable to give 500 CR, right? So the project reports that we prepared, all the building drawings were all ready for 1,000 CR. So it was, everyone was stuck, like, how do we go about? Our project is for 1,000 CR, now we have to cut down to 500 CR, right? So the funding pattern changed. And at that point, I think it was my second year with Smart City. I was a junior architect back then, and I got the opportunity to pitch this idea to the SPV chairman. And why don't we redo all the building drawings? So they were like not willing to do that. That's a lot of work, and it will take at least 2 years to do that. But somehow, I got with senior engineers there, and we really worked on all the buildings, all the project reports that we have currently. So right now, all the buildings under Smart City is under delegation for IGBC certification, Indian Green Building. And we got the opportunity to rework all our buildings, as in like how we consume energy. For example, we change all the materials. Instead of going for the traditional materials that we use, brick and mortar, we incorporated steel. And rather than the traditional roofing, we opted for a PVC material, which you see in the current local ground, right? So, and then how we use water. So it's very common for us to, harvest rainwater. So we incorporated all those into our designs as well. And now, I would say we, compared to all the traditional buildings, I think all the Smart City buildings that are up right now, we consume its energy consumption is down by at least 30 to 35%. That is as per the studies by the committees from IGBC. That is one. And the other thing that I wanted to highlight was most people think Smart City only deals with public infrastructures, right? But there are so many things that the media and the common public doesn't know about. The thing that I wanted to highlight is smart city is working a lot in the policy aspects as well, right? So Boca spoke about waste management policies as well, and so there are certain very interesting policies that Kohima Smart City is working. So we are working with think tanks and or NGOs who are leading all this. So one is Van Leer Foundation. Van Leer Foundation is like focusing on safe, healthy streets, safe parks for children. So there is one ITDB. ITDB is also one think tank, and NIUA. I think Boca is with NIUA. So we are working with all those organizations to frame policies. So one policy that is already on the verge of being published is healthy streets. So we have conducted pilot projects. One is near the PHQ junction. That is one. That is the other one is High School Junction as well. And the third one, we wanted to do a project where children are involved. So we thought, why not we go to the LFS School Junction? I think everyone is familiar with that area. So what we did was we narrowed down the pedestrian areas, drew lines, and kept barriers, as well as when a vehicle is approaching, they have to they are aware that okay, there are lines, so naturally we slow down. So those were some detailed small inputs that we did, and then traffic calming activities where children can cross safely. So those are some things that we did, and the other thing that we're focusing right now is sensitization as well. And coming to our working with Van Leer Foundation, we are trying to develop children parks in all the 19 wards in Kohima, since we don't have much outdoor spaces for children to play besides couple of areas that we have. So our mission is to create pocket parks in all the wards. So we have completed 6, and I think in 2 areas that we have created, Global Shaper is partnering with Kohima Smart City as well. That is our library project. One is completed in Naga Hospital. So even for Naga Hospital, besides being in a hospital, they didn't have the space for children to play and just be themselves, feel safe. So we took an area inside the children's park, and we created a park, a very small park where Global Shapers was also a part of it, where we kept an open library. And the other one, which is coming up, is in the Battle Tank area, Rajbhavan. So there was basically a dumping area for Kohima. So now if you go and see that, we have transformed that park area. It's a very clean space now. We have the digital library there, and Global Shapers is also planning to put up our library there for the public to access. Yeah, those were some things that I wanted to highlight, and
Again, coming back to Kelly for the first question, since you also have a very, very different experience in terms of what we've experienced in Nagaland and about your experience growing up and then moving abroad for studies, work experiences, so that must have had a huge shift in your upbringing. So what I also want to emphasize here for the question to you is, because you also mentioned a lot of indigenous actions and the community efforts to drive policy change. This is my personal observation, but I feel that the transition in Nagaland has happened so fast. So before the arrival of Christianity, it was like animism across Nagaland. So the concept Naga itself is very vague, and I've also listened to your father sharing about his experiences, very correctly mentioned, accurately mentioned. And I firmly believe that you also take a lot of your learnings and experiences from your dad's journeys. So what I wanted to emphasize now is that as Nagaland, as a state, as a community, how do we actually tap our indigenous knowledge, and how do we also acknowledge this information, the practices, the traditions which we have already been practicing since time immemorial, if that is relevant for our context. And relating this concept to the global sphere, they are like way ahead of us. Even when we compare the terms indigenous communities for Nagaland and for like other countries from other parts of the nation. So my question will be, how do we acknowledge and how do we promote our indigenous knowledge and cultural systems, and not only to also educate the younger generations, but also to make the generations which are ahead of us to understand this importance, that this is what we have been doing and we actually need to put more focus on what we have been doing sustainably or doing it right. But with new concepts, we tend to like get carried away by new ideas, new thought processes, and very much we are largely influenced by American and British missionaries. So yeah, that question is over to you now.
American and British missionaries and K-drama and K-pop. So I think a lot to unpack there. One thing that we acknowledge is that our community is going through 4 industrial revolutions in one generation. Meaning that, like I said, my father and his family was enemies until the end. So only on at my grandfather's deathbed in 1988 that he converted to Christianity. And my grandfather and my grandmother converted because in the afterlife they wanted to see their children. And they could see that children were converting because of education and the growth of Christianity here. So we acknowledge that we're going through an immense period of change, more condensed than most other places, right? So we're talking about one generation within the past 35 years, right? We went from, from the past almost 40 years, we went from celebrating Sekrini in a very different way, praying to Chikeo, right? In our own family, right? To becoming educated, to seeing the first computer, right? And now working with AI, right? So that's only happened in one generation, right? So I think we need to acknowledge that amount of turmoil that's happening. I think one other thing is that apart from that, one of the gaps that we don't enter into the past is because of the trauma that we've gone through, right? So when I was young, I was speaking to some of my colleagues, and we were talking about how the gunfire used to play and used to look like fireworks. And one time we used to live in high school, so we were coming into Russell Point to visit my auntie. And we couldn't because the army stopped us, there was gunfire, the car got bashed in, we had to turn around and go back, right? In addition to that, 45% of my cousin brothers passed away before 40. Most before 35, right? Of the previous generation, statistics are quite similar. So we have to acknowledge that there is a barrier for us because it's painful to go into the past. When we're able to acknowledge that pain, when we're able to work through that pain and trauma, then we can push past that barrier and go and get in touch with our forefathers. So if we're talking about how do we get in touch with our indigenous side, how do we get in touch with what we know to be tribal, we have to acknowledge and push through the generations. Right? It's very hard to think about my cousin brother's generation because of what occurred. Right? It's very hard to think about my father's generation. The village was burnt down twice. They lived in the jungle, right? During those times. So it's hard to go back because you have to unpack these stories within the family context. We all know our parents don't want to talk about it. So we have to unpack those things and move through that pain for us to get in touch with our forefathers. So I think that's one of the things as an individual we can do, right? How do we begin that process of healing, right? And the great thing is that it's not unique to us. Tribal and indigenous communities all around the world have experienced extreme trauma. For the Australians, Aboriginals, and the Native Americans, they were put in reservations that were taken off their own land. Then they were separated at birth, and the colonialists tried to breed them out. Right? So if you take an indigenous person, you put them inside a white home, then they marry, and then the bloodline will get wiped out. Right? So that's what they had to go through. For us, we're extremely lucky that although we're a minority in the larger context, we're a majority in our own land, which is extremely rare for any other indigenous community in the world. So that's an extremely, that's a great asset that we have, right? So we can capitalize on the things that we have access. Right? A lot of tribal and indigenous communities don't have access to those things. Our access is not blocked by physical means. As in, we weren't removed from our land and put into reservations. We weren't moved into the city, right? We weren't having, like, I have a Scottish friend, for 400 years, they couldn't speak their own language. They had to speak English. You couldn't speak Gaelic, right? So we don't have the same barriers that other communities have around the world, right? But we do have this particular barrier that's painful for an individual to go through. Right? And I think once we're able to heal and push past that, we have great access. Right? So our lands are there. Many of our previous generations are there that we can speak to have those learnings. What was the second part of your question?
So basically, I wanted to understand how do we also promote these?
Yeah, so once we push past this barrier, we have to download the knowledge, contextualize it, right? Where our previous generations are unable to do that because the mindset is still in the first industrial revolution. We're still at an agricultural mindset. So that worldview, it's very challenging to bridge. For us who've gone through the multiple industrial revolutions, who sit here now in the world of like Internet of Things, AI, cyber physical world being merged, our role is to be able to make those links and then to be able to articulate that. Right? So the great thing about policy, right, and the great thing about having our contributions made, it's about the frequency and the depth of conversation occurring. Right? So when you're trying to get a policy passed, right, the way that it sits, it might sit as a bill before it turns into an act. What we call political will, right, is about the level of conversation and the depth of those conversations occurring. Right? We had a very nice example only a few weeks ago, where there are 147 lecturers and professors who were regularized, and then, of course, they were done through, said to be done through backdoor appointments, and all that thing occurred, right? So, one is the particular issue and challenge that we were able to do, at hand, was being articulated. So everybody was very clear what had happened, what had gone wrong, and how to fix it, right? The narrative was very clear. So the NQFC did a great job, right? But what pushed it was enough people were talking about it, right? So it was a conversation probably in this cafe. It was a conversation in your office. It was probably a conversation amongst your peers. It was a conversation in my family, right? We all have somebody who connected to our 147 people. So what pushed it is that we were able to articulate what the challenge was in a very clear way. The media involved, people involved, but there was a high level of frequency of the conversation happening in the public and therefore happening in cabinet. Right? So what we can do is, one, we need to articulate, right? So we need to push through whatever barrier that we're having, right? It might be challenges within your own family, challenges about talking about the past, getting connected, This may to do with frequently visiting. So, for example, I was just in Panama yesterday, and I try to go as much as possible. Right? Having those conversations with your family to be able to download that knowledge. We have an oral history. So the only way that you're going to be able to know this is to speak to your elders. There's no other way. Everything that you read is through the lens of colonialism. All the history that we write. Right? So if you're reading a history book, you have to understand that, and indigenous people did not write that. And when we have PhDs who are going through Nagaland University and doing that, like my own nieces and nephews, they're quoting them. So the only way is to have the conversation about it, is to speak about it. And oral history is amazingly accurate, right, in terms of the themes that we're talking about. So one is that having those conversations with them, being able to articulate, increasing the frequency of conversations that's occurring, right? And that's what influences policy at the end of the day. I hope that answers the question.
Moving on, for Boca, I was again relating to my personal experiences. So you have been largely working with different agencies and government departments in the field of policy. So I actually want to take this moment and this opportunity to also reflect on how can we trigger the young people, the students, to actually become interested in understanding policies better. Because prior to my experience with Center for Researching Schemes and Policies, which is an organization started by very senior bureaucrats across India, I have had like a very brief stint of 2 years in Meghalaya, working with the government of Meghalaya. So that was actually a turning point for me to come to this realization that understanding policies are very, very crucial, and understanding and using data to make decisions are very crucial. So I wanted to hear about your insights on how we can actually trigger the youth in Nagaland, at least to start a step on how we can start them young in this field.
Hi. Am I audible? Yeah. I can just speak from my own experience, so I might be wrong here, but so I'll just bring a conversation that I had with my friends, with my peers regarding like in Nagaland we have a Naga fishing community, right? We have the photography community, we have a vibrant music community, but there is this lacuna of discourses, and Global Shapers is hopefully, I'm really hoping, fills that gap, and organizations like GSP, Kohima, Global Shapers, feel that. But for me, from my academic background, then when I studied, trained as a policy analyst, special with my background in TIS, it also came from an academic training perspective. So when you look into issues, you try to see like not just like a one-dimensional aspect of an issue, but like you're trained to see in a very holistic bird's eye approach and things like that. But I would go back to the initial part, especially when you're bringing back to young people, right? Like policy is not something, to be honest, not something complicated, but it's actually a part and parcel affecting each one of us in our lives, in everything, in every aspect of, policy is just a set of guidelines or norms, just basically processes around how to go about certain things. But going back to the question of young people and youth engagement, I really feel it's a very interesting space. It's a very pertinent space also, and young people can really start involving through the initial part of the thing, like internships, right? Like say you're interested about a certain subject, you're interested in agriculture, search for organizations that works in the agriculture department, or you're interested in climate resilience or climate change. Try to get yourself involved in organizations like we have Nagaland Climate Change Cell. I believe the internship ecosystem in Nagaland, kudos to Naga, you guys are doing a fantastic job in that space. But even within the government system, it's, to be honest, not really, we're still yet to learn in terms of how do we even actually, take the raw talent, the vibrant, the young energy talent of the young folks, studying in amazing institutes across the country, outside, and use it for the state also. So it's like a co-learning thing. So internships, sometimes, I mean, in conversations, say, oh, it's just an internship, you know, but no, I mean, like, it has a co-benefit in terms of what the intern and the organization are giving this internship. So one approach would be starting with internships, and one of the, two or 3 years back, I was part of this very small initiative started by Michelle, Nassau, and Benjamin, and it was called Project Enable. It was more like, it was also that one, I don't know Michelle, I don't know Benjamin, you know, but I saw their video about why it sadly has taken a pause for a while, but you know, we need more platforms and communities like that. So I organically was very interested as a person, you know, like with what they're doing. How do we contextualize the SDGs in Nagaland's context, right? Like, how do we think about the SDGs? How do we bring practitioners and people both inside the government and outside the government, and really think about the SDGs in general, which are the 17 goals across all thematic areas, and how do we really imagine SDGs for Nagaland? And that was also another point of entry. I think it also comes from a place of, you know, interest, I would say. I mean, how do I put it? But I think that's also another way is get yourself into these kind of spaces, and those are the areas that one can really get into, into the area of policy. And it's not something, again, alien or something. It's just, like I said, part and parcel of each of our lives. So I would encourage more young people, and also I'm really hoping that I would also like to take this opportunity that Global Shapers Hub Kohima, besides the fantastic work that you guys have been doing over the past couple of years, also be a platform that also catalyzes innovations, and also be an advocacy platform, not in the activist perspective, but really good evidence-based, being very open to receptive to the different kinds of perspectives and things like that. And I'll just take an extension a little bit on the track. Again, I'll go back to my experiences. Just one story. So just last month, I went to Tuensang on a field visit for one of the Niti Aayog projects, where we were doing central sponsored scheme assessment of the different thematic areas of the short-term consulting project, but we were looking into how flagship schemes like the Samagra Shiksha, you know, what was the other flagship schemes? I forgot. Since there are a couple of 3 flagship schemes which were the Government of India's flagship education department. So how effective is it on the ground, right? So Tuensang, I was in Tuensang. It was my first time, I'll have to admit. Though my mom is also from Kifli. But that, even in terms of development, when we think about Nagaland in general, sometimes, at least for me, I've been guilty of that in the past, we assess how much Nagaland is in terms of development. Sometimes our view is a little myopic, I would say. Like, we only amount, like, say, what is Dimapur, how is Kohima, how is Chumu, right? What about the eastern part of the, you know, I would say, how are the development indicators and those things on those perspectives also? But there, on my way back, I want to go back to the indigenous thing. So I visited the market with my friend to get a couple of, you know, vegetables and fresh organic things, and when we all use UPI now, right? Like digital payments, and the first vendor, the woman vendor, most of our shops are, you know, women vendors, street vendors, right? Our indigenous women and things, our mothers. The first lady, she had a UPI. I could pay her off through UPI. The second lady, the second mom, the mother, she did not have a UPI, right? And then the way she said it was like very, like, you know, oh, I don't have UPI, how, you know, and it was very like a place, it came from a place of such, you know, like, I'm very scared, and I asked him, oh, it's a very easy process, why don't you let your kids do it, you know, or like, you know, it's a very simple process. But I think it also pertains to, say, example, things like when we think about, again, indigenous food systems also, it's all led by our women, but with by our indigenous women, and what we see in the markets here also, even with climate change, in our food systems, even the way we eat, you know, even the produce, and how people call this term of climate migrants between the own state, between interstate, you know, especially in who is being affected. Yeah, this kind of questions also I'm coming to it, but also say when we do interventions like financial inclusion for street vendors or street vendors. Like, these are really lived experiences of many of our women folk. So how do we actually like say, so that woman is already very much behind in terms of her small business, also in terms of advancing and growing, things like that. So these are some of the experiences I learned, but going a little bit outside of the question box. But yeah, like those experiences, and would love to know more about what the audience have in mind also.
Since you are playing the role of a senior architect directly working with the government of Nagaland, I would also want to better understand how the general public can also collaborate with the government agencies, the departments, in order to improve their while framing the policies or while developing some programs, schemes. So just before you take the time, I want to share an experience which I've had in Meghalaya. So very interestingly, Boka earlier mentioned about the term mission-driven bureaucrats, which I've seen firsthand. You actually need to have very dynamic mission-driven bureaucrats if you want the programs to perform more than the indicated like outcomes of the schemes or programs or policies. So how they function is that it's not necessary that the IAS officer or the state officer is like super smart or like smarter than usual. Behind him or her, there's a very young dynamic team who is like doing all the backdrop work and providing the data, the ideas, the methodologies in order to push that bureaucrat to perform his duties. So coming back to Nagaland, not limiting to sustainability and environmental resilience, working with the government, how would you like give your thoughts on that? How can we better work with the government as public, as CSOs, in terms of coming up with better policies and programs for the state?
Okay, so I don't think this applies to all the government departments, but when it comes to the smart city mission, so to incorporate citizens' inputs and all the grievances. So every month we have, what Smart City does is we have an advisory forum where multiple stakeholders are there, right? So from civil society to business organizations. So like we have multiple individuals as a part of the stakeholders group. So before we roll out any project, we do a presentation where we take citizens' inputs and more importantly, we take the inputs of the users who are directly going to be affected. Say for example, we are doing a community building in this colony, PR Hill. So we take the panchayats as well, and we take a couple of the youth leaders here. So what we do is we take inputs, and if it's feasible, we incorporate them, and if it's not feasible, we have an open dialogue where all inputs are incorporated. So yeah, I think that answers your question, right? And in line with that, I wanted to add this. So we have a project. It's called Kohima Integrated Solid Waste Management Plan, right? So we currently have a solid waste plan in Hire, just below the helipad, which has a capacity of about handling like 120 tons of waste. And currently Kohima is producing about 70 to 90 tons per day, right? And moving down the line, 10-15 years from now, I don't know if the solid waste management plan that we have right now will be able to handle all the waste that we are producing, right? So what Kohima Smart City is doing is we are working with KfW, it's a German bank, development bank, and AFD, French Development Bank. So they are funding the project. So it's called Cities 2.0 is over, but they are planning to roll out the 3.0 very soon. So we are on the move to incorporate our project there. And with that being said, coming back to your questions, we need inputs from citizens. Just the decision makers cannot, get all the ideas to be incorporated into the project. So in that line, my experience in Geneva as a curator. So very fortunately, I got the opportunity to meet representatives from border banks, right? So I did pitch the idea of what we were doing, and they were very keen about it. So it's funny, like, I was talking about the conveyor belts that, the machines that need to be incorporated, but they were like, look back, in speaking in India's context, they were like, I think rather than moving into machineries, plans, they were like, why don't you work on sensitization? Right? Which I feel is very important. I was like not really considering that, but I think we are very much behind in, for example, waste segregation as well, right? Wet waste, dry waste, right? So without the segregation of wet waste and dry waste, like, it's very hard for the people in the plant to segregate waste. So it comes in like megatons. So like they are unable to do it. So right now it's just directly going to the landfills, right? So they provided a plan for us to focus more on sensitization. So our project is like, focusing more on sensitization. That will take about at least 3 years. 3 years of like, in-depth sensitization for all the citizens, right? So after that only we plan to like, move on to the machineries, like, other pilot projects. So in that context, I feel global shapers will play a very important role. Global shapers will be a major stakeholder in that project, right? And I feel that with our wider connection and leveraging all our contacts from, across the hubs in the world, I feel global shapers will be a very, important player in the team, like, giving inputs and, for the upcoming project on waste. Yeah, so I feel that, all the young people here, like, if your vision aligns with global shapers, what you want to do with us, and so apply for joining us, like, come be a part of the change that we are leading.
Thank you, Teja. I think I want to give Teja some more time because for a lot of participants today who are here with us, I believe this might be one of the first time you have been hearing about Global Shapers Kohima Hub. So as the curator of Global Shapers Hub Kohima for the last year, I think this is actually an apt time to also share about his experiences and also very briefly share about what Global Shapers is about. Because as you have mentioned, you had the opportunity to go to Geneva as part of the World Economic Forum. And what are your takeaways being part of Global Shapers, and what can the students and then the youths, our younger ones, look forward if they come or are interested to be a part of it?
Okay, so Global Shapers, we are like, a community of very young individuals from diverse fields, okay? And there are multiple hubs across the world where we get to connect, interact, and share ideas. And okay, I won't dive into the details of like what topic is, but it's a group of young individuals, right, where we get to connect and work on problems across the world, share ideas. And yeah, I feel there are certain criteria to be a part of Global Shapers as well. So I think our team here, if you're interested, you can speak to them later on and they'll fill you in on that. But besides that, yeah, I think if you want to be a change maker in your society, in your own community, Global Shapers gives a very good platform for you to explore your ideas, share your ideas, and get in touch with the community, wider community outside, yeah. And my takeaway from Geneva, right? We have the annual summit, which happens every year. So I got the opportunity to go 2023 to Geneva, and here like I say, like we do have like a lot of ideas that we discuss, right? And I went to Geneva and I got the opportunity to like share my ideas with the wider community, and I was quite surprised that they know a lot about us, right? For example, like how what I was saying earlier, like why don't you work on sensitization? That was an eye opener for me, right? They were like they had the knowledge of like in that knowledge of how we are, like I'm sure like they spoke in a Indian context, but it directly applies to us. So like in that way, like I got to share ideas about my personal ideas on building constructions. Like there are a lot of architects in the community as well. So I got a lot of inputs, and made a lot of good contacts, which I'm still in touch with, and like I always hit them up whenever I need anything. Like, and yeah, I think those are the gist of my experience with it.
Thank you for that, Teja. So right now we'll be opening the floor for taking 3 questions because we are running short of time. But before I open the floor for the questions, after the Q&A session, I'll give maybe 1 minute or so to all the speakers to share your final remarks, and then we'll summarize and close the session. Okay. So the floor is open for questions. 3 questions, please.
Large corporations and even governments often acquire vast areas of land in the name of development. This raises a critical question, which is how can we strike a balance between economic development and environmental conservation in a way that is both sustainable and just?
Great question. So I think, firstly, we need to say who is pushing, or when you said a lot of countries are pushing for large industrial projects, taking swaths of land, it's not always the case in all countries, right? So what we might be talking about, like developing countries who are getting to that next stage of development. Developed countries are really pushing for a sustainable agenda, right? So I think we're talking about that specific band where we might fall into, or where India might fall into. So I think as a new generation coming up, we really have to define what life for us means. And what are our priorities? That stems going from directly to what your values are. So what are your values as an individual? What are your values as a community? And for us, it's quite simple. We care about our families. We care about our backyards. We care about sustaining ourselves. So if those are our set of values, if that's a value set that you have, as you're growing up, as you're turning into leaders, as how do you continue to advocate for that? Right? So I think it's really going about back to a values base. What do you value? Right? And therefore, so when we're talking about large industrial projects like the gas plant I was talking about, or wherever it might else be, at the end of the day, people are making those decisions. Right? Why are they making those decisions? What's driving that decision making? So that comes back to what are their values? What are they valuing? So here, what's great about a newer generation is that we're not as obsessed with materialism as the previous generation. So if you're talking about the 80s, 90s, maybe up to the 2000s, the materialism is not as rampant. I think there's some level of understanding that you don't need that much in your life. So those values need to manifest, right, into policy. It needs to manifest in what we do when we're in positions of influence, when we're making decisions as an individual, as a company, as an intern in a company, as a leader of a company, as a director of a department. How do you go back to your values, and how do you then push the agenda moving forward? So I think those are some of the very important things. Yesterday I had a friend come from Delhi. He works with a lot of very large corporations. He has a relatively successful business. It's called HA, they're compliance firms. And we went to Jileke, we moved around, we saw the forest, we went to Konoma, we went to the field, we had lunch, we had everything, and we were sitting there and we were looking across in one of those tea stalls, we were looking across at the village, and he said to me, real luxury is not expensive. So coming from a city where you can't even see the sky, right, when you fly into Delhi, right, you can't even see the sky. What do you value? What is luxury for you? Right? And when we were sitting there, luxury for us was able to sit, have a meaningful conversation, bond as two human beings, breathe the freshest air we could breathe that he will never get in his entire life living in Delhi, in Gurgaon, right? And look at the majesty of a forest over 40,000 years old. Right? No amount of money in the world will give you that. So he's saying, we're staying in 5-star hotels, traveling around, we were talking about our trips across the world. What is real luxury, right? And what does it cost you? So I think when we're talking about large industrial projects, what is the reason for that, right? Is it to feed our consumerism, right? Is it to feed our bellies? Not so much food wastage that occurs, right? What does the energy go to? Does it go to where of things that we value, or is it going elsewhere? So I think it really starts with us as individuals, whether we're interns, whether we're the director of a company, whether we're a bureaucrat, whether we're an MLA, whether we're an MP, whatever position, you go back to what do you value? Because in our own lives, in our own circles, we have a circle of influence. Right? And it's about practicing all the way through. And when we speak to people who are doing large-scale industrial projects, and I've spoken to them, right? You start to recognize that there's a value mismatch. They're doing it because they were told to do it. They're doing it because they think they need to do it. And if you just go back, what do you value? It comes back to very, very basic, simple human values. Right? When they start to recalibrate and re-register that, then their decision-making change. When the decision-making change, what they sign off and what they approval for the building also changes. So I think that's how it starts and how it begins. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so I think this question goes for two of our speakers, that is Mokai and Teja. So yesterday I was burning plastic in my kitchen and I got a call. Now this, raised a concern for me, thinking that how adverse burning of plastic can be. And there were questions that came in my mind where I started thinking about how are the government, or like you said, smart city, you said we're going to input sensitization. What are we doing about it? How are we going to sensitizing people? Because I just burned a small amount of plastic and today now I got a cold, right? Now these also made me think about how we have so many landfills in Nagaland. Do you have any policy where we're managing it? Like how do we do it in cities? If so, if not, what are we going to do about it? Since you come from that field, no? And taking this platform, since we have the medias out here, since we have people who are potential leaders in the days to come, what are the takeaways that both of you would like to give, including the answers that I'm looking forward from both of you?
That's a very, very relevant question, and I think this is a question we're already contending. I'll just touch a little bit, answer your question also, but picking from where Teja talked about the plan for Kohima. So as part of my master's project, I collaborated with the Kohima Municipal Council. We did a citizen perception survey. So that was a really, basically, we looked into the softer nudges of, what are the citizens of Kohima thinking around, how are you interacting with the whole understanding of waste management. So that perception survey was basically around questions on Are you able to segregate your waste? What are the challenges to your segregation? Or how much are you paying? Are you willing to pay more? What is the number of days that your waste is being collected? Do you think, if the number of days is increased, you will be able to segregate your waste more? Because we all talk about all these infrastructure, hard infrastructure, but again, I think at the end of the day, it all really comes down to very simple thing like segregation, right? But why are we not able to do this? Because, so many policies can come, but because it starts from, when you think about waste management also, it has like the whole value chain starts from, from the production, consumption, then the post-consumption, how as the last users, how are we thinking about that? To also going back to directly to your question, plastic waste and waste itself, I think we all have to really think that it's a public health issue. It's not just a waste issue, right? It's a plastic waste is a waste, and plastic waste particular is a public health issue. Many studies have shown that microplastics are already in human blood, microplastics are already in human placenta, microplastics are already in even human semen, and it causes of many cancers. In recently, this very advocacy group called Break Free from Plastic Waste, they have also shown that plastic waste is even within the air we breathe, the water we consume. So I think we should start thinking about plastic waste not just as a waste in general, as well as a management issue, but a public health issue. When you talk about landfills also, the last thing you want to do send to a landfill is the inert waste, what we call. We don't send everything that we're doing right now in Kohima or most of the cities right now, we are not able to segregate. So we just dump everything. We won't even call that a landfill, to be honest, because landfills are supposed to be scientific. So we call it a dump, what do you call it? We just dump everything there, right? So I think it starts, so many things have been done over the years also. I'm sure the government's also really, and the government of Nagaland recently had the committee on, they recently launched a committee on environment and climate change. It's a group of legislators. We're really hoping, I would also like to take this platform and also Global Shapers community in Kohima Hub also, that how can we also involve the third sector in the sense that practitioners, people as individuals in this committee, very pertinent committee that the government have also, it's good to know that the government has also taken action and they have recently set up a committee also on climate change and environment. Yes, that is the status right now. So. Like I said, as a person working in policy, we can have the most fanciest policy, many things, but how do we contextualize it for Nagaland's context, right? Example, EPR also, when you talk about extended producers, plastic waste, then it comes under EPR. So in that policy, what it says is that the onus is mostly on the producer, major onus goes, the producers, they are called the producers, so like the producer responsible organizations or these people should be accounted for the waste that they are producing, right? All the FMCGs or all the these things. But even in that tool, there is a very catch that it's geographically neutral. So this player like a Parley or a PepsiCo or Chowdhury groups, the YY and all these things, they can say they will collect or they'll take credit, they'll take the waste from a very easier area, like a geographically easy area where they can access, and particularly hill states, not just Nagaland, but broader Indian Himalayan mountain states are really facing a big issue because they're not getting any kind of those support, right? Now it's the onus is all on of us also, but then for me, I would also like to really see on a macro level, right? Like, what are the systems in place that really can move citizens and towards a more managed plastic waste management that is more holistic. I hope I answered a part of your questions in that.
So I feel you should be penalized for what you did in the morning. No, but coming back to that, see, I think that is what sensitization is doing to our community, right? Looking back 5 years down the line, if you are burning your trash, I'm sure no one is aware. No one would even dare to call the agency, in fact, right? So I feel the seed has already been planted. People are aware. The citizens are informed. Maybe not on a higher scale, but at least they are informed of what is going on. And it's nice that agencies are being notified for what is being going on, right? So in that line, the laws that we're asking, the rules. So we do have the Kohima Municipal Act, the Municipal Act 2001. Yeah. So we do have the municipal act in place, but I would call it a toothless tiger, right? So we are unable to enforce it, and I'm sure majority of the citizens are unaware about the act, right? And in that line, I feel like sensitization, right? This is my personal take. So I think for the older generation, right, if we are to sensitize, we need to penalize, especially in our context. Like, if someone is doing wrong or they are breaking the rules, I think they should be penalized. For us Nagas, I think we learned the hard way, right? And for the upcoming generation, I feel the best method for sensitization would be in schools, right? We start young, right? Even in the lower grades, we start sensitization program. So rather than our target audience being the older ones, we focus on the younger ones. So that way we are able to sensitize the next generation, right? So it's easier for us, down the line. I think that answers your question.
Resilience has been incorporated, especially in the policy level or in the area that you are working in. So, what resilience means to you and how that's been incorporated, if certain aspects of resilience can also be pointed out, what way that's been incorporated. Yeah.
Just to cut off, sorry, but can you please direct that question to a specific speaker because we are running out of
Okay,
time.
then I'll direct that to Buka.
Very, very, very nice question. I mean, it's something we use every day, right? Resilience. My understanding of what resilience would be is, how do you bounce off, or how do you stay the long term or long goal in terms of whatever. If you're talking personally, personal challenges, or if you're talking about systems in place, how resilient systems are in the sense, if any exigencies occur, is there systems in place that can take into account those exigencies and bounce back and move forward in those kind of things. What was the second part of the question?
How
Yes. Right. So I'll very nice, very relevant question. I would go back to us as Nagas, right? And KB here has really told. We have a very how would I put the word? Our history is very conflict-ridden, right? And as communities also, but again, I'll go back to my work when I worked with the wards. I took 2 wards when I did this study. And very interestingly, Nagas as indigenous communities, we have a very strong sense of community, right? We really have this very strong sense of community, and community-led efforts are at the end of the day, they do sustain the long term, they do take the goal of the long term. So just even platforms like this, when we think about, will it just be another platform, sometimes, I hope it does not be, but how do we ensure, we bring back resilience, the continuity, the enduring nature of those kind of things. So some of the wards in Kohima, very interestingly, we didn't have elections for many years. Just last year we had. So Waste management as one of the services was taking care of the ward sanitation committees. So each ward had a ward sanitation committee. These committees were very interestingly not elected by election, but by sense of local basic understanding, right? The leadership. And then in some wards, like the forest ward, I forgot the number of the ward, the forest colony where they do the parks and all. The local leadership there was so strong that very nice that they were able to manage the waste very efficiently in terms of at least collection of waste. They were able to pay their drivers very well. They were able to even buy another truck, right? So as per we also have in terms of policy the Nagaland Communitization Act. Even the Nagaland Communitization Act, it has been with a lot of accolades, but now how do we actually strengthen that really, And I think go back to your answer of resilience. Nagas, we are a story of resilience, us as people, right? And even how do we bring that into our policies, contextualizing it, and very bringing that and something not when we do interventions, how do we bring that so that we ensure enduring resilience and ensure that anything that's being implemented goes the long run. Hope it answers your question.
You said ideally it would take around 3 years, and as the rate at which we're doing it right now, from what you've mentioned was that we're only talking to the educating the children, and the adults are not being thought about it much, right? So at this rate, I think it will definitely take more than 3 years for these children to become adults. So I think it would. That's I think. Do you feel that there is more things that we can do instead of just teaching the children? I just wanted to get your opinion on that as well. Thank you.
Let me just share the questions which you have raised. So basically, he wants more details about how the sensitization is going to go about. So if you have more details, you can please break it down for the entire audience.
To answer your questions, right, I did mention that like sensitization, we are like our primary focus is on the children, right? But we also need to sensitize the older crowd, right? So to that, we have different programs, right? One is door-to-door sensitization, right? And the other is like community programs. So we will entrust the local panchayats. So they will be taking leads on that, and we will be training people from all the wards, right? Volunteer from all the wards where they will be going and sensitizing and carrying out our programs, like so that we have a wider reach, right? I think that answers your question, right?
Under the sensitization, the entire idea, do you have like more actions which is to be like taken up by the Kohima Smart City, apart from reaching out to the kids, to the elders, or working through the communities? Do you have like more plans?
Okay, so I wouldn't call this a sensitization method, but the other one is, if we do something and money is coming back, everyone is interested, right? So I think this would touch a little bit on the circular economy, right? So when we dispose our waste, not the organic waste, the plastic waste, right? So we already have facilities to process our waste, and right now Kohima can, right, the facility that we have can make recycled plastic waste, right? So it can be made into pellets, where those pellets can be reused again for other products, plastic products, right? So in that way, it's giving back to the community as well, right? The money will be generated through waste. So we don't have any takers, public takers from our community, but there are people from outside who are interested on managing our facilities, right? So the work are still ongoing. We haven't rolled out the project as of now. But yeah, those are some things beyond sensitivity.
Thank you for that. Now, as we come to the close of the session, I would give the time for each speaker to give your final remarks. It's open to anyone, whoever wants to take it first.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, again, I'd like to reiterate my gratitude to the Global Shapers Hub, Kohima, and I believe these kind of platforms are so pertinent, especially in a state like not just Nagaland, but especially where youth voices are centered. I would really like to stress again on the youth voice. Youth power is future power. Youth power is really shape narratives, and platforms like these are very can act as catalysts, and hopefully GS Global Shapers Hub Kohima would also be a real catalyst for leading those kind of advocacy changes and bringing in all kinds of different experiences and people, practitioners in terms of achieving a more sustainable development in Nagaland. I also want to take this opportunity to really welcome, especially the young crowd here, to the National Youth Climate Consortium Nagaland chapter. I am part of the National Youth Climate Consortium Nagaland chapter. We basically work around climate change advocacy and mostly around advocating centering youth in advocacy for climate change and the environment. It's just started last month, and it's across all the districts of, we have folks across all the districts of Nagaland. We have folks from Mon, we have folks from Tuengsang. Fantastic work they are doing really in your own communities. And I would like to take this platform to invite young people also to be part of that. And I hope that these dialogues like this will lead up to a more conversation, like as Devi has told about the kind of conversations that we really need to have, and hopefully, really need to change an understanding of the issues that's grappling all of us.
Okay, I'll also give two shameless plugs. One, again, of course, to our dear host, Global Shapers, thank you so much. One thing I like about this group is because we all have communities. We have our communities of our family, our clans, our village that we belong to, our church. But it's great in this age to have a community of people who share similar ideas, who think the same, who share values. And what I've been noticing is that being part of the group is really about being an alumni. So there are a few alumni in the back there, if you can wave. And this whole time, even up till now, they are so much enjoying each other's company, right? They're real friends, right? Not only that, they're in positions of influence, and they're in positions to create change. But they come with a shared value set, and they're like-minded, as you say. So being part of Global Shapers is also, as you're going through, being part of the great initiative that we heard about, but the real part of it is being an alumni, having a bunch of friends that you hang out with, that you go off into your own walks of life, but you have that network and you have that connection. And every time there's a wedding, they sit on a table together. I join them because my wife is also on my life. And it's just so much fun, right? So thereafter that, if you really know what it is to be a global shaper, you talk to the alumni. Okay. Second shameless plug is that I run an organization called Naga Ed. Now we had a chat about the importance of internship. So we do have an internship program as well. So we have internships from here, a couple of interns from IIT Kanpur, and then interns from IIMs. We have IIMs from here as well. So we have two of our interns here. We can just stand up and wave. So Soyoung and Rovi as well. So if you want to know what it means to be an intern, what's the value of being an intern at Naga Ed, please have a chat to them as well. So there's 2 plugs from my part. Thank you
so much. I would speak more on the global shapers part. This is my last opportunity for it. So basically this is what we do, right? We take local issues and global issues as well, and as a group, we speak on it, and global shapers community is a community where we actually once we try to press on it, we work on it actually, right? So similar to all of what we are doing today, I'm really happy that Tung and the whole team of GS came up with this idea, and I think it's amazing that we had to get to speak about the pressing issues in our community, right? So like I said earlier, if your vision and your ideas align with what we do, right, please hit us up. We are on all social media platforms right now. We are available. You can get our numbers as well. Please reach out to us. Let's work on issues together. And if all works out, come be a part of us. It's not just an NGO where we work on problems, but it creates friendship. That lasts a long time. Goes beyond the work, right? So please feel free to hit us up and if join us.